Hi guys, Miss Headwell here. I am back to read chapter 18 of the book Flush. Chapter 18. The food coloring didn't show up as brightly in the sea as it did in the store bottles, but you could definitely see it. As Abby and I had hoped, the current and the wind were in our favor, transporting the dye down to the shoreline in a shiny stream from Dusty Muleman's basin. Dad and Grandpa Bobby stood together on Thunder Beach, admiring the telltale trail of fuchsia. "I'm impressed," my father said. "This was your idea, Noah?" "Abby's too," I said. "All I did was pick out the color," she said. "That's not true. We were 50-50 partners the whole way." My father slapped a hand on Dad's shoulder. "Payne, you and Donna really lucked out with these youngsters. They are true champs, both of them." "Most of the time," Dad said, shooting us a sideways glance. "You gotta admit," said Grandpa Bobby, "this is a whole lot neater than sinking the man's boat." "Yeah, Pop. Thanks for bringing that up." Mom kept staring at the purplish slick in the shallows. Even though she was wearing sunglasses, we could tell she was upset. At first I thought she was mad at Abby and me, but it turned out she wasn't. She was mad at Dusty Muleman. "Unbelievable!" she finally exploded. "How can a person do something like this? A father, for heaven's sake. All the kids on the island going swimming here, and he's poisoning the place with all this. Said Abby. "Whatever," my mom fumed. "The man ought to be in jail. He's a menace to the public health." Dad has a long list of people that he says should be locked up for one thing or another, but this was the first time I'd ever heard Mom say that about anybody. My grandfather, who was also my grandfather was all my grandfather also was angered by what he saw, although he tried not to show it. "Jail's too good for the lowlife who did this," he said evenly, "but it's a start." Abby and I looked at each other, uneasily at first. Abby and I looked uneasily at each other. We'd seen Grandpa Bobby in action before. "Payne, you remember that big muttonfish I caught here?" he asked my father. "The 15-pounder?" "You bet I remember. Only it was 14 pounds," Dad said. 14 even." "Are you sure?" "Anyways, it was a hell of a catch," said Grandpa Bobby. "That was back before they dropped fish traps all over the reefs. Back before certain creeps started dumping their crapola in the sea." There was a rumbling edge to his voice, like he was struggling to keep his temper under control. Mom said, "Don't worry, Pop. Someday, Dusty Muleman will get exactly what he deserves. People like him always do." This was her famous "what goes around comes around" theory. My grandfather obviously didn't buy it, although he was too polite to say so. He picked up a branch of driftwood and swept it back and forth through the stained water. Somebody probably ought to notify somebody probably ought to not somebody probably ought to notify the Coast Guard while the tide's right, he said. I didn't mention the phone call I made earlier in the house. As if on cue, a sound like a rolling drumbeat rose from the north. Abby said, "Listen, guys, you hear that? Thwacka, 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 thwacka. Thwacka, waka, thwacka, waka, thwacka, waka." We all turned and looked up. "Over there," said Dad. He has eyes like an osprey. The rest of us couldn't see a thing. After a while, my grandfather spotted it too and pointed where to look. At first, it was just a fuzzy dot in the wide open blueness of the sky. But as the dot grew larger, it turned blaze orange and took the shape of a helicopter. The drumbeat of the rotors became loud and high-pitched. The drumbeat of the rotors became a The drumbeat of the rotors became a loud The drumbeat of the rotors became a loud, high-pitched whine as the chopper circled lower. On its belly, we could plainly read the words Coast Guard. A side door rolled open, and a man in a dark jumpsuit leaned out. He was wearing a white crash helmet and aiming a camera down at the water, taking video of our amazing Fuchsia River. We waved at the Coast Guard man, but he was too busy to wave back. The helicopter gradually began to move, following the colorful current of evidence all the way up to the beach, all the way to the marina where the Coral Queen was moored. There the chopper hovered for a long, long time. Dusty Muleman was officially busted. Abby whooped and Grandpa Bobby clapped and I pumped a fist in the air. We headed home feeling hopeful and happy, though Dad and Mom weren't quite happy enough to forget about me and Abby sneaking out of the house. By the way, you're both grounded, Mom informed us in the car. I signaled for Abby to stay cool, but she ignored me. Grounded for how long? She asked indignantly. Indefinitely, Dad said, which was better than setting an exact number of days or weeks. From experience, I knew that indefinite grounding could be negotiated favorably. If only Abby would quit whining. It's not fair, my sister said. In fact, it really bites. Watch your mouth, young lady, Mom warned. But we just saved Thunder Beach. Don't we get a bonus points for that? Grandpa Bobby said, Abby, darling, it won't be so bad. Anyways, it's probably a smart idea for you and your brother to lay low for a while. And he was the family expert on laying low. I waited until we got back to the house before asking my parents to delay the start of our grounding. Just until tomorrow, I said, please. My father eyed me suspiciously. Why? You've got big plans this afternoon? I need to go think, Shelley. Me too, said Abby, scooting to my side. Dad left the decision to Mom, who drilled us with one of her I'm not kidding stares. You've got exactly 1 hour, she said. Not a minute more. We dashed for our bikes, Abby calling over her shoulder. Grandpa Bobby, you better be here when we get back. My mother and father, honestly, care about each other, but they argue about plenty of stuff. Sometimes it seems silly to me and Abby, but other times it's really heavy. For instance, Mom was 99% serious about divorcing Dad if he didn't come home from jail and get his act together. I totally understand why she felt like that, and at the same time, I could see the point he was trying to make by sinking the Coral Queen. But even when my parents are fighting, they don't actually fight. It's only sharp words back and forth. No fists or blunt objects. Unfortunately, some people really get carried away, as my sister and I were reminded as we showed up at Shelley's trailer. She was sitting on the steps, gazing off in the distance. She wore black jeans, a gray Gap t-shirt, and a blue trucker hat turned backward. In one hand was a sweaty bottle of beer, and in the other hand was a rake. Some of the tines were snapped off, and others were bent at sharp angles. It wasn't the sort of damage caused by normal, everyday gardening. What's wrong? I asked. Love is a strange deal, I swear, she said. You want to come in? It's an awful mess, I'll be honest. We'll help you clean up, Abby offered. What kind of mess? I asked. Like nothing you've ever saw before, Shelley said. Think you can handle it? After seeing the condition of the rake, I wasn't so sure. To stall, I asked her what happened on the Coral Queen after I jumped overboard. She laughed. Nobody heard a thing because the band was so loud. Everybody kept drinking and gambling. The customers who saw you run past, they figured you belonged to one of the crew. What about that nasty old lady who tried to break into the bathroom? Oh, her? Free stack of chips and she was back on the blackjack table, happy as a clam, Shelley reported. Speaking of bathrooms, I had to make like 7 trips before I got all the purple goo. I had to make like 7 trips before I got rid of all that purple goo. Every time I'd get settled nice and cozy, somebody'd start banging on the door and saying they can't wait. My wrists hurt from flushing so much. But our plan worked, Abby piped eagerly. Did you hear the helicopter fly over? That was the Coast Guard. We saw them taking video of the stained water. No kidding. Shelley looked pleased. She stood up, spinning the rake like a cheerleader's baton. Did Dusty say anything after the casino closed? I asked. Nah, he was a total basket case, Shelley said. There was some big fight on the dock, and Luna got his butt seriously whipped, is what I heard. One of the bouncers drove him to the hospital, and the cops showed up, asking what happened, but by then, Dusty had already split. The crew didn't know any different, so they just waited until all the people were gone and pumped the holding tank straight into the basin. Same as usual. I told Shelley she'd done a great job. Thanks for emptying those liquor crates so I had a place to hide, and for sneaking me into the lady's head. And most of all, risking your own neck to help us out. Yeah, you did awesome, said Abby. But what about Dusty's secret spy at the Coast Guard station? How'd you fix it he wasn't around this morning when Noah and I called the coral... How'd you fix it so he wasn't around this morning when Noah and I... How'd you fix it so he wasn't around this morning when Noah called in about the Coral Queen? Shelley propped the rake on one shoulder, like a rifle. Come in, she said to us. But like I said, it's not a pretty picture. She wasn't kidding. Inside the trailer, it looked like a small bomb had exploded. Broken lamps, overturned furniture, dents, holes in the fake wood paneling. 2 men lay face down, one on the gross shag carpet and one on the gross moldy sofa. We couldn't see their faces, so it was hard to see if they were dead or alive. The one on the floor was sopping wet and striped green with slime from the aquarium, which lay on its side, empty and cracked. Shelley used the rake handle to poke at the unconscious man on the sofa. You asked about Mr. Billy Babcock? Well, here he is. Billy Babcock made a low, snuffling sound, but he didn't move. What'd you do to him? Abby asked. Nothing he didn't want done, Shelley replied with a snort. He spent about 2 hours yakking at my bar last night. I figured the only way to guarantee that he wouldn't be at work this morning was to bring him home and... We get the idea, I cut in, not wanting Abby to hear the R-rated details. That's cool, Noah, watching out for your little sister, said Shelley. But don't worry, I was a perfect lady. I invited Billy over for one of my high-octane cocktails. Maybe 2. All we did was hold hands on the couch until he got tired of telling me how gorgeous and wonderful I was. Then he keeled over and went nighty-night. So who's the other guy? I pointed out the soggy heap on the floor. You don't recognize him? Shelley chuckled again. Using the business end of the rake, she snagged the man's ooze-covered shirt and rolled him onto his back. When I saw that pasty, sunken face, I was completely blown away. Well, who is it? My sister asked impatiently. That's lice peeking, I said. In person. Shelley unhooked the rake from his shirt. I told you, love's a strange deal. Is he alive? Abby asked. More or less, Shelley replied. You guys want a Coke? We sat at the dinette and listened to her story. It was a good one. After my father had gone to jail and started spouting off about the Coral Queen, Dusty Muleman had gotten nervous. He made a list of everyone besides Dad who knew the truth about the pollution scam and had sent Luno to warn them and had sent Luno to each person to keep quiet, or else. The goon hadn't murdered Lice Peking, as Shelley had thought, but he had scared the bodily fluids out of him. When Luno had shown up at the trailer, Lice naturally assumed that Dad had found out about his secret deal with Lice naturally assumed that Dusty had found out about his secret deal with Dad.